Okay, welcome back.
Welcome back.
So, let's say we want to color this, but you know, a lot of people like to just pick a background color, and again, Alt backspace is going to fill your foreground color, just so you can see what it is you're coloring a little bit better.
Sure.
So like the reason that is let's say we you know, did have the white here and wanted to start coloring this way. The problem that you might have is you might start filling stuff in all the white places, but because you have a white background, you might miss some. Or
can't really tell what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Or sometimes like your colors might just look different than they would with a different color background or whatever, because like your eyes can play tricks on you, stuff like that. So generally speaking, when you're going to do coloring, it's good to have a different color that you're not using in your character. So if you miss anything, you know, it's just easier to spot that way. Okay. So I actually think I am going to use this color in the pauldron here. So let me change it to, well, let me select it first and then I'll change the color. That looks very similar. Let me get one like, we'll go gray. We'll go this brownish gray.
Okay.
Pretty good. Okay. All right. So I'm happy with this. I'm gonna select a color that's like just off white. It's not quite white, but I think it's nice for troopers. And what I'm gonna do is, for the sake of speed, I would like to get color on everything in this character all at once without the background.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. So the way I am gonna do that is I'm gonna use this thing called the magic wand tool. Right? So over here, it's your W shortcut key, and make sure that you have your tolerance set to 0, because what tolerance is basically when you make a selection, if there's other colors overlapping near that selection, what it's going to do is it's going to judge how far the selection should go. So if the colors are similar and you have 0 tolerance, it's going to separate them.
Okay.
If the colors are similar and you have a high tolerance, it's going to select everything. It's not going to separate them.
Okay.
So typically for this, you want to have your tolerance set to 0. And you're going to make sure that you have all these things, anti-alias, contiguous, and sample of layers, checked off. So that's exactly what we want. And I'll show you why we might want them unchecked later. But for now, that's what we're going to do. So again, we're going to make a selection outside where the background is the opposite of everything we want colored. And as you can see, it makes a selection around the entire canvas. That dotted line is going all the way around, and it's going all the way around our drawing. Mm-hmm. And what we're going to do, I'm going to zoom in real close so you can see what's about to happen. We're going to go to Select, Modify, Expand. Right now I have it set to 2 from an earlier project, but because we're working so big, I'm going to change that to 4. And what that's going to do, keep an eye on this dotted line. As soon as we hit OK and we have that set to 4, all of a sudden that selection moved in underneath the line art, which is very, very helpful.
Why do we need that?
Well, later on it might be a little bit more apparent, but for now it's kind of one of those things where the layers are your friend. Mm-hmm. So you know what? I can do a quick demonstration of that real quick. So we have this layer over here underneath the line art, right? Mm-hmm. If we draw underneath here, it's going to stop underneath that layer. And if you keep going, it's going to come out on the other side because that layer is on the top layer looking down, right?
Right.
So if we have this layer above it, then it's going to go right over that line art layer. So your layer placement is very, very important. Now, let's say we make that selection in here, right? Mm-hmm. And then we fill that with the color. Now, because we're working so big, you can't quite see it. It's not much of a difference. But what you're not seeing is a lot of these pixels, because we're not using vector, a lot of these pixels are not getting that color. So if you were working a little bit smaller or whatever, it's if you were to zoom out, you'd have this weird like halo effect, and it would just look really wrong. So maybe if we use blue, it might be more apparent. Yeah, so you can. This is a better example. So you see how it's not filling it. It's like real ugly, and it's like, oh, it looks wrong. It's amateur hour. You don't want to be amateur hour here. We're showing you the right way to do it.
The right way to do things.
Correct. So before we get to that, again, we're going to select the outside of the entire thing. And again, we're going to go to Select, Modify, Expand, and for this instance, 4 pixels. And now we have a selection that's on the inside, right? So what good does that do us right now, right? Like if we were to start coloring, it's on the wrong side. We don't want
we don't want to color on the outside.
Right, that's stupid. So that's really dumb. I mean, maybe it's cool for later, but you don't really need it for now. Well, we want on the inside, so we're gonna go to select, and then inverse, and now you'll see that dotted line is missing from going around, but the dotted line is still in the drawing. That means it's all inverted. So what we can do is Alt backspace, and now we have all that white thrown in there.
Nice.
Now, why do we do it that way? Because it's a hell of a lot faster to do it that way, as opposed to doing this one, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one.
Because
and then
most of the trooper is white already, so it makes sense.
Right. So what I typically do is I fill the entire thing with the color that I'm either going to be using the most or is going to be the most difficult to fill later. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, we have this trooper here, and I deselected the selection. So now we have everything on that trooper, and everything is hunky-dory. If we start coloring with the mouse, as you can see, it's still going outside of the lines here. So what I like to do, as soon as I get that fill in there, there's a trick that's very, very similar to having a selection tool without actually having that selection active still. You can leave it on if you want to, but I like to remove it and do this trick instead. This little button right here is called Lock Transparent Pixels.
Okay.
And what that does is if whatever layer you have selected, so you want to do this on your flat color layer right now. So if you check that off, you see that little lock appears next to it. And what that does is that tells Photoshop, okay, when you're selected on this layer, no matter what you do, anything that's already on there, so all this white, you're only going to let stuff happen on that part. Those are the only pixels you're allowed to do anything with.
Cool.
So now I can go in, if I want to do it this way and I want to hand color it, or you can use the magic wand tool, whatever. But for this instance, it's just a lot faster to do it this way.
Sure.
So it overlapped onto this part. I want this part to be red, but that's okay for now. So if you zoom out, which zoom out, by the way, is Alt spacebar, is zoom out, and Control spacebar, zoom in. So I want that color to be there, and I want this color. If you hold Alt, that's your eyedropper tool. So let's say you change colors for whatever reason. Let's say I have black. You know, I hit the D key by accident, and now I have colors that I don't want. Hit the Alt key, and you get that eyedropper tool, and you can basically point to whatever color you want. And as you can see on the left side here, it changes colors while you're holding that. It is. It's good stuff. Okay, so I'm going to use the smaller bracket key, and I'm going to use this color. And I think I want to go a little bit darker for the triangle mouth. So I'm just going to, if you click on that, you brings up your color picker stuff. And I'm just going to go a little bit darker, and then zoom in. I'm just going to fill that in and see how that looks. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that looks.
Okay. Good.
Triangle mouth. All right. Getting there. All right. So for now, instead of doing this on the ink layer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try a couple of different things. I'm not sure what I want to do with this visor yet. So I'm just going to make a selection on a separate layer. Expand. And I'm going to start with black.
Okay.
For now. And I'm going to do the same thing where I lock those transparent pixels. And I'm going to select a blue. And I'm just going to see what this looks like.
I see what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm pretty into that. I'm pretty into that. I think I'm going to leave that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah, I like it.
All right. So, you know what? We need this color. I missed a spot, so I'm going to go back to my other flats. And I'm going to fill in the indent over here. Over here and over there. All right. Very good. All right, so photo is missing one key thing. It's the color red. So I have a bunch of colors that, you know, there's a bunch of default ones, but then I also have a lot that I use pretty frequently. I'm not sure if I want to use this red specifically. So what I am going to do is I'm going to create another layer above the flats. And I'm just going to make some selections and fill those in with red. And possibly change them later, but for now I'm just going to go with this color and see how it looks. It does look pretty nice. Okay. So I'm using my brush tool.
This
Not
red.
too-
This red is specific to Fordo, right?
Yeah, it's pretty close. So I probably am gonna end up keeping it.
I mean the fact that you're using red on the trooper.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
Red, Fordo. This is Fordo's paint scheme. This is
Yeah.
what separates him. My bad. Okay, so the reason I did it on those other layers is just to make this cleaning up part a lot easier.
Sure.
So I don't have to worry about being too perfect. Because I'm lazy.
Makes erasing easier.
Alright,
Do
so
what
that
you
is
gotta do.
absolutely. That's exactly the mantra. Alright, so pretty happy with this. I think this color could be a little bit nicer. So what I'm gonna do, perfect time. Let's say I want to change these colors.
Okay.
These I want to keep the same,
Yeah.
right? These I want the same, and I did change those before. But this color over here, I want to change. Up here, gonna uncheck everything, and what this does, where before, if I left this checked, it would just make a selection there, and then if I held Shift, I could make more selections. And you can do it that way, but it takes kind of forever to do it that way. So if I want to change everything that is that color, I'm going to uncheck all that stuff, make sure that I'm on the layer of the colors that I want, and then there you go. All of a sudden, it makes the entire selection. So what you can do now is if you hit Control and then U, so press and hold Control and then hit U, now you can change that stuff to whatever you want. You can make it darker, you can make it more saturated, which I think I'm going to do.
Nice.
You can change the hue a little bit. So it ended up being very similar to this other color anyway, so whatever. Sometimes it turns out that way. And if you notice, we have a little imperfection here. You can just go in and fix that. Pretty easy to do. All right, so we have our flats. Pretty happy with how that's looking for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that old sketch layer, and
We don't need that anymore.
we do not need it. I think I'm also going to hit Control U on this background layer and change that a little bit. Let's go with the green, since green is kind of complementary to red, right?
Sure.
So
Yep.
that makes those reds pop a little
Yep.
bit nicer. I think it looks pretty cool. And maybe what we can do to make this a little cooler looking is we'll go with a slightly brighter, lighter green. And then I'm going to hit a gradient with just the color to transparency. And then
Okay.
from the middle, drag it out. And now it's got a little brightness going in there. It's a cool little effect.
I like it.
So a little something. Okay, so we're getting a lot of folders here, a lot of layers here. So the best thing to do is to use a folder. I telegraphed what I was going to say.
I get
mistakenly-
it. I get it.
Right. So I like to create a folder that's down here on the bottom right, and then just throw everything in there. So now we have everything organized in one little folder.
Okay.
So it's pretty nice. Okay. Now, what do you think we should do next? I'm curious what your opinion would be. Let's say we want to make it like realistic. Not
my
realistic.
most difficult part, which is shadows and highlights.
Everyone's least favorite part.
Yeah.
So shading isn't so bad. The best way to get good at shading, other than doing it a lot, is to just kind of look at think about it as geometric shapes, right? If you have a circle sitting on the ground, well, I'll do one real quick. If you have, let's say, all right, so we're gonna draw a bowl real quick, right?
Okay. Sure.
So there's two things. If we want to make this look like it's hanging out on a surface, what are we gonna do first? Let's say the light is coming from this direction, which may be a little confusing considering it looks like
Okay.
there's light.
So you would want to make your shadow of what it's casting a shadow, right?
Correct. So you want to have it cast a shadow on the bottom, and you want to have a shadow being cast on it as well. So if we do, let's say the light source is coming from here.
Okay.
Let's take a darker color. Now I'm doing what's called a cell shading style. So like there's more there's fancier ways to do it, but like all of a sudden, like that kind of looks like it's volumetric. But what's the problem with that? It looks like it's not actually on anything. So
Right.
now underneath it, we got to remember that it would cast, you know, a circle shadow like this, and then if we lower that a little bit, now all of a sudden it looks like it's just hanging out on that surface, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it just looks more realistic. And there's one more thing we can do here. We can have a lighter surface, give it a little bit of a highlight. So now it looks just a little bit more three-dimensional that way. So keep in mind where your light's coming from, and just try to think of it like very basic geometric shapes. That's the way that I do it. Anytime I'm having trouble, I just try to break stuff down a little bit easier.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna have the light source come from the same direction. For the sake of consistency. So what we're gonna do is between this layer, between these two, so I have my paint scheme and my flats underneath that, and I have the line art. So between the flats and between your line art, you're gonna create a new layer. The way I do this is I hit Control, and you see how this little picture, when you're hovering your mouse over it, it gets like a little square on the bottom. What you're doing there is you're telling Photoshop, okay, similar to how this made a selection of just that, now you're telling it you're on a different layer, and you want it to do the same thing. You want to select all the pixels that are on this layer. So that's what that box is. The box is like a preview little selection thing. So now we have a selection of everything on here.
Nice.
Now, the way I like to do shadows is to make things look very consistent with one another. I like to take a color. Doesn't really matter what kind, but I usually like a dark saturated one. So this blue is pretty nice. And I set the opacity a little bit lower. And I'm going to show you what happens when we do that. All of a sudden we have that like nice, cool little like purple look.
Yeah.
Right? So that doesn't work for everything. So like it looks a little bit strange on here, but it looks pretty nice on the lighter color. So any color that's lighter than this color looks pretty good. But if it's too similar, it's just going to look kind of wonky and weird. So what I do is I set that to multiply. And now everything looks darker. So that's just a nice little trick.
Yep.
So I always set my shadows to multiply unless I really want it to look vibrant. Then I might have two separate ones where I'll do that treatment for the darks and then have it set to normal for the lighter colors. It depends. It's all a matter of preference. You can do it however you want to do it. But for the sake of this one, we're gonna do everything on one layer and multiply. So now let's treat this like a geometric shape. So we're gonna do every little piece one at a time.
Okay,
So
good.
Let's say this rectangle right here, it's kind of cubish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the light is coming from that same direction. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the two planes that there's no light hitting it. So this side and this side.
Makes
Pretty
sense.
easy,
Makes sense.
right?
Yep.
Pretty easy. So, maybe make this look a little bit more three-dimensional that way. So yeah, that's pretty good. Now, what else do we have going on here? This thing over here might cast a shadow like that. And the same for this one.
Okay.
Maybe this is going to have a little bit of a bulb to it. So it looks like, it's not flat. Or you could do it so that it does look flat. And you just have like this kind of thing. Where like all of a sudden these look like they're just flat circles.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you do it like this, they look like they're, almost like spherical. So it's really up to you to experiment and figure out the best ways to do that kind of stuff. And if you really want to be thorough, we could also throw one more like this. Just for the sake of having it. So, pretty good. Pretty good. So now let's do this shoulder flap. Let's say that light is coming down over here. Now there's not really much we need to do. So I would just throw something like this to make it look like it's not super flat. It's just a little bit three-dimensional. So already that just looks kind of nice. And maybe for the sake of consistency, I'll throw a little bit over here just to give it the whole thing a little bit more dimension. Sorry about that. Yeah, so it looks pretty good. Okay, so again, that light's coming from that direction. We're going to do one of these Zoom in just to make it a little bit thicker. Maybe get rid of that top part. Okay. Same thing over here. Oh. And we established that there's a shadow on the bottom. See, this kind of thing is always difficult when I use Lazy Nizumi to get a specific line, and then I try to go in and hand draw something that's
yeah.
adhesive to that line. So
Sure.
that's where I'm gonna get a lot of
undos.
A lot of undos. So, you know, just for the sake, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you get the idea.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So now there's one thing missing on here that we haven't done yet. Actually, I'm not thrilled with that, but me and you are perfectionists. Me and you are perfectionists.
Me and you. Yeah, we are.
And you
I
are
totally get it.
You and I. Allison and I were having a conversation on how horrible it is when people can't get that correct.
Yeah, sometimes it's I, sometimes it's me. It's not necessarily always I, but in that case.
Okay, so there's one thing missing here. I'm curious if you can guess what it is, just on this part. We haven't gotten to the helmet. So before we mentioned the ball is going to cast two kinds of shadows, right? There's going to be a shadow on the form, and then it's going to cast a shadow onto whatever else is near it. So Fordo is floating in space here, so we're not really worried about shadows off of Fordo. But there is one shadow that would be cast on here.
His helmet. His helmet.
Oh, not yes. You are right. So I'll do that for the sake.
That's not what you were going for.
That's not what I was going for.
Okay.
Since you are correct, I am going to do it. You are correct. But there is one other thing that I would like to do. Okay, so this guy right here, attached to the pauldron, would definitely cast some kind of shadow.
Okay. Yep. I see where
That's what you were gonna say, right?
I mean that I would have gotten there eventually.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right, so that's looking pretty good so far. All right, so since we have the shadow coming from this way, from above,
the light.
I'm just gonna start looking at each piece and trying to judge how it would hit. So that part would have a little bit of shadow underneath it. Maybe there would be a little bit under here from that cheekbone, because we want that to look like it's pushed out a little bit further.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this would have a little bit on the bottom. Maybe these would have a little bit more dimension. Maybe that should go away. We get the teeth looking a little bit flatter.
Yeah.
You can, even though the light's coming from there, this is still underneath, so you can, if you want, play with shadows a little bit, because like it doesn't always have to be perfect. It just has to look good. And as long as it looks good, like consistency is always important, but like it's not like paramount.
It needs to look right.
When you're doing it. Yeah, as long as it looks good,
okay,
you're in pretty good shape. All right, so this part is indented completely, so I'm just gonna fill that whole cheek in, and this part is the opposite side of the head, so I'm gonna fill that in.
Mm-hmm.
Now we gotta judge where is it gonna go from being light to dark. So I like to think that the fin would cast a shadow, and then probably something around here. Now, this portion of the visor is pushed out a little bit further, so I'm going to give it like a little bit of a difference in where the shadow is actually falling there.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Because like your planes are going to look different. So like if I do this, it's going to look a lot flatter than I want it to.
Right.
If we do that, now it looks like it's a different plane, right? Like it looks like it's not the same surface, which it isn't. So, all right. Now let's say this plane over here and this one is close to the same plane, but because of this part sticking out, this is all in shadow from here, and then it's in shadow because the light is coming in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do is we're going to judge the line would come to about here, and then it would go that way.
Oh, I see.
So you just try to look for like a lot of how all the planes relate to each other.
Okay.
One of those, a little bit of this, and yeah, I mean that's pretty close to really everything I want to do. Maybe a little bit in there, And if you want, we can throw a little this way. You don't have to, it just gives it a little bit more of a punch.
I like it.
Yeah. Now, you might be asking, well, why isn't it casting a shadow here? Don't forget that since the light is coming from closer to the camera this way, that shadow that it casts isn't actually going to be on the helmet. It's going to be on wherever Fordo's head is being cast. So, like on the ground, down here somewhere or whatever.
Okay.
So that would, if it was directly side to side, then you would see like this kind of thing.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But that's not the case. I'm also going to throw a little bit over there, just for the sake of it. Okay, so this is fine. I think this looks good as a cell shaded, cell shaded character. It looks pretty cool. It's pretty close to complete. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more shadow for the sake of an effect that we're going to do in a second. So I'm going to just throw a little bit more. I'm going to push this a little bit further. And I'm going to push this shadow up a little more. And yeah, I'm pretty okay with that. Pretty happy with that.
I like it.
Okay. Yeah. So this next effect helps things look a little bit more three-dimensional. So before we mentioned that we have highlights. So one of the reasons that I like to use off-white for coloring troopers is because then we can go in and start adding actual white, and all of a sudden it's like a little bit of a nice highlight there. All right, so that, sorry about that. So now that looks a little bit brighter, right? Now it looks like he's getting some shine over there.
Looks even better.
Can you believe it?
I really can't.
I can. Not my trick. I learned it from many, many better, smarter artists than I. Okay, so we got that. We have a little bit there. Maybe some over there. And, yeah. See, all of a sudden, Fordo's looking like a pretty shiny dude. He just got his stuff washed. Now, what I like to do, so we have that bright white light coming from this way.
Yeah.
I like to have a secondary light source hitting shadows.
I like secondary light sources.
Yeah, they look nice.
Yeah.
They look nice. So I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to set this one to screen. Now, you can do whatever color you like. I like to look for complementary colors. So I already used green and red in the background, but we have this blue visor. So I think what I'm going to do there is I'm going to use a pretty bright orange. And we're going to see how that looks. Plus, don't forget, the shadows are also blue. So the orange on the blue might actually look pretty nice. So we got to decide where this light source is coming. So I typically like having my light sources in opposite directions. So if I have the primary light coming from this way, I try to make my secondary lights coming from over here. So let's just do a little bit of that. Let's see how it turns out. A lot of this is trial and error. If it doesn't look good, you can always go back and do more. But I'm just trying to keep in mind what it would look like if it were this color, and we can always change it later if we have to. And B, just what looks nice.
Sure.
If it looks nice, then, that's really all that matters.
That's the point of art.
Well, the point of art is self-expression, but...
Yeah. Yeah,
But yes, you are also correct. Okay, so what I am going to do is I'm going to lower this to there, so that what I can do now... Nope, that's not right either. Where is this? Is it right here? Okay. So now I have this cool little light source over there, so it looks like it's coming in as a reflection of the helmet, which is always pretty neat. So that edge would probably see a little bit. I don't necessarily think it would show up in here, but I would like to see how it looks. Nah, that makes it kind of look flat. Get rid of that. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
I like it a lot.
Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, I mean, at this point, like, anything you're doing is just going to be finishing touches. So, do you want me to keep going and show, like, some details that I might do? Or
Yeah. Keep
kind of-
going.
Okay.
I know in some of your drawings you add like texture-y kind of things.
Yeah, there's a, like, especially with troopers, I like
Yeah.
adding a lot of weathering.
Yeah, let's
So-
see some of that.
So I have, I wish I knew where they were from. I have this brush that I like to use a lot. I don't know what it's called, but Photoshop actually comes with a lot of brushes already installed. And you can just like use a lot of them for texture-y things. You know, look into, you know, grunge Photoshop brush tutorials. There's a ton of amazing tutorials on YouTube, and then, you know, you can Google and find them. There's a lot of great stuff. But what I like to use is this brush. I like to start off with this brush. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that whole area again, but I'm also going to do this underneath my shadow layer. So underneath that shadow, but above my flats, right? So I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to lower the actual brush opacity. So there's the layer opacity, which is everything. So if I do this and I mess with the opacity, it's, you know, it'll get that kind of effect. But instead, I'm going to change the brush opacity to about 14% maybe. And for now, I'm also going to change the mode to multiply. So it's the same kind of thing. So what that does is every little bit you do, it's just going to multiply it a little bit. So you have a little here. I'm going to zoom in. And then every time you do it, it's going to keep treating it like it's
okay. Yeah.
So just a little bit. I'm not gonna go crazy. Just, you know, along the edges, just to have a little bit of weathering. Try to keep it as consistent as you can. You know, doesn't have to be perfect. But like already you can see, like especially on the off-white here, you got like a cool grungy look to it.
I like it.
So the problem with it is the darker colors, it's a little bit harder to see, especially on that red. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to change the default color that it has. All right, so Allison, pop quiz for you.
Oh no.
I know. Let's say we have this color here, right? This color on the left is the color we're using for this.
Yeah.
Let's say we like the positioning of everything right now, but we want to change that color to be something darker. What are we going to do? Based on stuff that I mentioned earlier.
You had a shortcut to open up. So
Did have a shortcut.
That. I don't remember what it was, though.
Okay, I'm going to tell you what it is. So
Okay.
I'm going to deselect this. And again, all this stuff is all on one layer.
Yeah.
If we press this button, it's going to lock everything in place to exactly only those pixels. Anything you do with these pixels on this layer are all locked in place. So since we have that locked now, I'm going to choose a darker color. I'm going to go, yeah, that looks pretty good. And then I'm just going to Alt backspace, and now it's starting to look darker.
This is black sorcery, Joe.
All your life.
All
now,
my life.
But that has an inverse effect, right? Because now that did that, but now we lost the other colors.
Yeah.
So we have those locked. Now we can go back to that lighter color. And I'm going to lose the multiply. I'm going to lose the opacity back to 100. And everything we do now, I'm just going to fill that back in. I'm actually going to try and see what white looks like. Nah, I don't like it. I'm going to go a little bit... Nah, I don't like that either. Trial and error, folks.
Yep.
Trial and error.
Yep.
Okay. Alright, so there we go. Now we got a little bit of guff. Bordeaux's seen better days, and there's another little detail that we can do that I actually really like doing.
Okay.
So, remember earlier I had that paint scheme separated. That's because I had a feeling I was going to do it this way.
Of course you did.
So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to this little rectangle with a circle inside of it. And what that does is that creates a layer mask. And what that does is it tells Photoshop, if anything is white, you can see it. If anything in this layer mask is black, you can't see it. It's going to go away. So anything in between white and black too is also going to have that effect. So let's say if we go to gray and we fill that. Now it goes to about 50% because it's 50% value of gray, right? So you can see about half of it. So let's say I want all of it for now, but what I want to do is I want to give it some cool like weathering edges, and I want to use this brush to do it. I want to use this brush so it has a lot of texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with a brush that is pretty close to 100% black. And then I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to use that to kind of give it a little bit of weathering. So just, you know, don't get too heavy-handed. Just try to pick some spots where, like, maybe if Fordo got, you know, his helmet scraped on the ground, or
maybe the paint got dinged up a little bit.
A little bit, just a little bit. Like, you don't gotta go crazy with this kind of detail. Like, just a little tiny bit goes a long way. And all of a sudden, you're getting this cool little in the middle there, some scratch.
Ooh, I like this.
Over here, over there. This chin part is definitely going to see a lot of weathering over here, probably over here too. Maybe even like a little bit more, like just to give it like. Doesn't it look like a little bit cooler? Like
yep.
That? There. Maybe a scratch there. And like, look at that all of a sudden.
Wow.
Look at the difference there. Like, it's this like little subtle thing like that really makes it just pop out a lot nicer. And there's one more thing that I'm going to do, similar to what we have going on in there. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm gonna get a dark color, and I'm gonna make the brush a lot smaller. And then I'm just gonna have one or two like little scratch marks. Now it is a little bit dark.
You can lighten that up if you want, though.
Exactly. We're gonna lower that opacity. I like to get the edges, especially.
Sure.
Because like
where
that's
the most
stuff
wear
that you're gonna
exactly.
You're gonna get a lot of scratches over there. Maybe there's a larger one here. That guy needs to go away again. So because I'm using this textured brush, it does look like, you know, they're absolute scratches.
Yeah.
It's not as clean as the shading, so it's easier to not, you know, confuse the two. A little bit over here. A little gunk in the red. A little gunk on the insides. Edges might be hard to see because of that highlight. And yeah, let's lower it up. You know what? The viewfinder would definitely see a little bit of sticking out like that. He probably breaks that thing all the time.
Needs a replacement every time he goes back.
He's anything like me. He's clumsy, and that thing's getting caught on everything. Guaranteed. A little bit up here. Yeah, and that's starting to look pretty solid. If we just, lower it a little bit. Look at that guy. Look how fancy he is.
That is awesome. I love it.
All right. What do we got? What do we got here? Can I do? Yeah, okay. I did that blue. All right, I'm going to do some real quick ones on here.
Okay.
Just for the sake of consistency, you know, again, don't have to go crazy. A little bit on the edges. Okay, pretty happy with that. And we can throw some finishing touches. Let's see.
What else would you do?
Trying to think here. Let's see. All right, I got an idea.
Okay.
I'm going to create a selection on this. And since we have that light source coming from over here, and we have that other light source coming from over there, real nice and subtle. Where is the T-visor? Okay, T-visor's over here, so I'm going to make sure this layer is above it. I'm going to go to a gradient. I'm going to make sure it's this little circle gradient and not the linear one. I'm going to grab a blue color similar to the one I had in there, and I'm just going to move just a little tiny bit. And I'm going to set that to screen and see if I like that. I think it could work if we... No. Oh. There we go. That's kind of cool. All right. Yep. So now it looks like there's that like nicer little reflection coming in.
I like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna lower it a little bit. Okay. All right, pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Background's a little boring though, right?
I mean, you could spice it up a bit, sure.
I think so. I think so too.
All right.
All right.
What are you gonna do?
So we're pretty happy with Fordo for now. I do like how much he pops off of that, so I'm gonna try to keep that pretty consistent. What I am gonna do is I'm going to go to, I have an entire, actually several folders, but for what I want right now, I have a texture that I'm gonna throw right onto here. I actually don't know where I've gotten many of these from.
That looks like a similar folder on my desktop.
Yeah, I just throw textures together and don't pay much attention. Sometimes they have names in there, and when that's the case, I always try to, credit those people. But this one that I love using, these two guys right here, texture 24. So I'm just gonna move it over and I'm gonna drag it over here. Yeah, that guy's awesome. So I'm just gonna reposition it, and if you hold Shift every time you move it, it's pretty, it's pretty linear with how you're moving it. So it loads this way. I want it this way.
Yep.
So now I'm going to reposition it, and I'm just going to drag by this corner down here, and I'm going to pull it over here. Hit Enter to select it. And right now, Photoshop is looking at it as a smart object, so I can't actually edit this color or anything like that. You can set the the blend mode to whatever. I'm gonna try a couple of things, which is already looking kind of nice. But what I want to do is I want to make it a little bit more green. So to actually edit this itself, you're going to right-click, not the picture like I just did, and you're going to rasterize it. What rasterizing does is it tells Photoshop, okay, don't make it a smart object anymore. You can edit it with the pixels as it is. So now I have it. I don't know how well you can see it. It's kind of orangey, which, I'll bring it back up. This is what it looked like before I brought it into Photoshop.
Yep.
And it's kind of orangey, so you know what? I might even set it to normal just so we can see what we're working with. Control U, again, will bring your hue saturation, and now we can change colors a little bit. So now we can get something closer to the green that we want. So that's actually pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with that. It's pretty simple. So what I might do is an overlay and a multiply. Those are usually where I start. Okay. So it is a little distracting. Fordo's not jumping quite as much. So what I'm going to start to do is select both of them. Just lower the opacity. I'm already happy with that. Like, that's exactly what I want. So when there's a happy accident like that, it's always a good day to celebrate. So I think there's one more thing we can do to make Fordo jump just a little bit. It's something that I do pretty frequently.
For textures like that, you can Google that and you'll find hundreds and hundreds of just random textures.
Yes. Yeah. Just Google different, and you can Google different. You don't have to just Google texture and hope you find it. There's grunge, there's wood grain, there's rain, there's paper, clouds, anything you can imagine. Cement.
You'll find it. You'll find it.
It's crazy. It's great. So that's just easy to have when you need a library of things. Like, it's good to hold on to that stuff. So what I'm going to do here is what I would like to do is have a white line perfectly going around it. And that's called a stroke. And the way to do that is to take the outermost layer, which of course is our black and white line art. I'm going to Control J or Command J, depending on if you're using a Mac or a PC like a normal person. And I'm going to take that extra layer and I'm going to drag it all the way down to the bottom of Fordo. So it's the last layer right underneath Fordo.
Right.
You can't really
want it underneath,
Right, you just want it on the very bottom, but not underneath your background. Just where you want the stroke to be at the very end. So we have that there. We're selected on that. We're going to go to Select. Nope. Wrong. Layer. Layer Style. And then Stroke. And now you can see already.
There's a black stroke there.
Set that off.
Yeah.
here's what it normally looks like, and then it adds that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to white, and I'm going to hit OK, and now I'm going to zoom out so I can see how it looks as a whole. And yeah, I like that a lot. I'm going to make it a little bit thicker, and check that out.
I
That
like
looks
that.
pretty neat.
Yeah.
Now, there is a problem that might occur. Let's say earlier on when we were doing this, it looks like, miraculously, this is very rare for me that I don't have this problem. This is always something that I have to go back and correct. Yeah, wow, it's not here. I'm shocked.
Okay.
Anytime you're doing your inking, when you're erasing lines, you might miss like 1 or 2 little tiny pixels, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. So let's say earlier before, remember how we had this line and then this line crossing and we erased everything?
Yeah.
Might have missed like a little tiny piece over there. Look what that does.
Oh, yeah,
It
totally.
zeroes in on that. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to zoom in, make sure that you see if there's any like big splotchy white spots where it shouldn't be.
Sure.
You got to zoom in and make sure that you get all that. And as soon as you do that, as you can see, it disappears. And that's why it does that.
Okay.
Because anything on that layer is going to get that stroke. So I'll show you what it actually looks like without it. The reason we put it on the bottom is because it does the insides of the lines too.
Yeah.
So if we have that over here on the top, here's what it looks like. It looks weird and wrong.
We
and
want
that's
it on
the-
the outside only.
That's why we want that on the bottom.
Total.
So now we get that cool little effect. Now, for those of you that might not have a lot of RAM on your machine, the more layer effects you use, the slower it's gonna, make your computer, and it's gonna eat up more memory because, Photoshop is constantly recalculating these things
Sure.
as you're doing it. It's constantly trying to keep up with what you're doing. So what I do, once I know for a fact I'm happy with a layer style, I'm going to right-click it, and I'm going to rasterize. And now that layer, no matter what you do to it, it's not going to add that stroke to it. Like, it is what it is. It's just going to be like any other layer.
Okay.
So that's just one last thing to keep in mind. Yeah, so I guess there's only one thing left to do. What do you think that is?
Sign it.
That's the one. So for me, I go into my bottom right corner, and my little dumb JH, and that's that.
It's
Happened for
so beautiful.
Ready to go.
I love it.
Woo!
Well, thank you so much, Joe, for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thank all of you guys for watching me and putting up with my obsession for a cartoon character from 2003.
I think a lot of people are going to share that obsession.
Woo.
If you want to see more of Joe's stuff, I will also post links to his YouTube and DeviantArt because he's got some quite awesome artwork you might want to check out, and he does his own videos that you can also check out if you want more of Joe Hogan. So
Don't ask me why you would, but
I like watching your videos.
oh, so you're my one follower.
Yeah, I'm your one. That's me. Alright, thanks for checking us out, and see you next time.
Bye.